From all over the world, people come to visit London's great palaces. And in this programme, I'll be looking at palaces built both for royalty and for working people. Behind me is one of London's great palaces. This is Hampton Court Palace. Hampton Court Palace was originally built for Henry VIII, though Sir Christopher Wren added some bits in the 17th century. It's a magnificent building with stunning gardens, and it was Henry's showpiece. Here I am in Henry's Great Hall. It's 100 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 60 feet high. The most striking thing about this room is the hammer beam roof. The hammer beams support the arch, meaning the roof span can be much wider. And it's ludicrously over the top, decorated with endless bits of carving and gilding Henry really wanted to show off. There's another rather intriguing thing about the roof. On every hammer beam, there's a little chap leaning over and apparently looking down and listening to what's going on below, to all the scandal and the gossip among the courtiers. Now, we don't know who those chaps are. They may have been representations of courtiers themselves. But the fact is, because they're in the eaves, they came to be called eavesdroppers. Up on the roof, there's equally intricate decoration. These beautifully crafted brick chimneys were the status symbols of their time, although all 241 are Victorian copies of the Tudor originals. I love those Tudor chimneys, and I couldn't help wondering how the Victorians copied them so beautifully. I mean, here we've got a bit of chimney. Well, it's not a real one, you understand. It's a sort of pretend chimney with those terrific spirals. And obviously what you need is a whole lot of bricks shaped like that. Now, how on earth do you shape a brick like that? Well, fortunately, there's a man who knows here. Richard, where do you start?
The first process is to make the brick flat and square.
Then you have to cut it a bit thinner, obviously, because this is thinner than that.
Exactly.
How do you cut off the extra bit?
We use these wire saws.
So this is just wire?
It's just ordinary twisted wire.
OK, so you cut it down to the right shape.
Process, yes.
Yes, but what I want to know is how you cut this amazing shape here, this curve.
We cut the brick into this mould, and we've got to hold it in place so that we can actually do the cutting process.
Very high tech. Yeah, great. OK.
And we follow this profile all the way down through. Brush that off.
That's fabulous. Right, and so there is the rounded bit to match that. So all you have to do now is saw through the other half.
Yes.
Once we've done that, we'll have one of these.
You'll have one of those.
Well, I think that's fabulous. And how long do you reckon it would take you to make that?
Maybe 20 minutes, half an hour to get a rough shape.
Well, that's very impressive. So that's the Victorian method. Now, Gerard, how did the Tudors do it?
With this.
What's this?
Brick axe.
A brick axe?
A brick axe.
I've never heard of such a thing.
Yes.
What an amazing weapon. OK, so where do you start?
Here's a Tudor brick. And this is actually a genuine Tudor brick.
So first of all, you've got to square that off,
yes,
like the Victorian
ones.
ones.
Rubbed down. Once that's done, then the templates can be applied to it. And what would happen then is we scribe it using this rose head nail.
Oh, wonderful.
And then we follow that round,
right,
scribing in to get the shape all the way round, like that.
Right.
The brick axe would very rapidly dull if we tried to cut out all of that shape from that brick in the first place.
Right.
So we cut the angles out on the corners using this pad saw here, and we take it down to form a series of fillets down to that line,
right,
which we are then able to chip off using the brick axe. And of course this is a tool that wasn't seen on a British site now for over nearly 150, 160 years.
Let me have a go before you finished it. You're going so incredibly quickly. So then you just go...
That's it. So break your fillet off, just give it a nice little smart tap.
Oh.
That's it, lovely.
Right, so suppose you finish that. What about this curved bit? Because that looks impossible.
It does, but again, it can be done exactly the same way again.
And you're just doing it by eye down to your scribe.
Down to my scribe line. Bringing that round. Getting that through. like that. So
That
now
is
I've got my-
spectacular.
my draft.
Now, how long do you reckon it would take you to make a finished brick?
I honestly believe that I would be able to do one of these between about every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes.
Ah, so you might, in fact, do it quicker than Richard.
You'd be surprised.
All right, are you ready, chaps? Looks to me like... Richard, thank you very much indeed. That was great. Gerard, thanks.
Thank you very
Now I can make my own brick.
Thank you.
Buckingham Palace is arguably the best-known palace in the world. It was built by George IV, but the palace we see today is not how he or his architect, John Nash, envisaged it. The original plan was that Nash had a U-shaped building. This is the back, sides of the U, and in the front, the Marble Arch as the main entrance. But when Queen Victoria moved in, she started having children all over the place, and the palace was just too small. She added a new front, and the arch had to go. So in 1851, they moved it here. And the trouble is, they never got round to finishing it. It was supposed to be wonderfully elaborate, gorgeous carvings commemorating the Battle of Trafalgar, all that stuff. And here we have a very plain arch in the wrong place. Maybe if I borrowed a chisel, I could improve it a bit. I don't think I can improve this one, though. London has actually voted Buckingham Palace their fourth most loathed building, so I think we better move swiftly on. This other famous London palace is much more impressive, although it's the home of politics rather than of kings. This is the Palace of Westminster, which used to be a royal residence from way back in the time of William the Conqueror all the way through to Henry VIII. All the kings lived here. And then in 1512 it burnt down and Henry VIII had to move out, and the politicians took it over for the House of Commons and the House of Lords. In 1834, another fire caused massive damage and very little of the old palace remained standing. In its place, the Victorians built this, a wonderful Gothic building. Hello, you must be Malcolm.
Hello, very good to meet you.
I gather you're going to take me round this fabulous building.
I am indeed.
So this is the old bit, yes?
This is the medieval hall, Westminster Hall, of the old Palace of Westminster.
So this survived all the fires?
This survived all the fires and, of course, the main fire in 1834.
Right.
And it goes back to the 1090s.
So it's almost 1,000 years old?
Indeed. This is the central lobby, the midpoint of the Palace of Westminster building. We're standing, in fact,
Oh, really?
on the midpoint here. You're in the middle of the new palace, and
Right.
behind you, you've got the corridor leading to the House of Commons debating chamber.
Right.
And then directly opposite, at the end of this long corridor, you've got the House of Lords.
In the spirit of the Victorian age, the architect, Sir Charles Barry, had agreed to finish building the palace within 6 years. He was perhaps a little ambitious. It actually took 25 years. Did Barry do all these details as well?
Well, Barry was helped in much of the work on the palace by his good friend Augustus Welby Northmore Pugin.
So where can we see the best of Pugin's work?
I think in the Palace of Westminster, undoubtedly in the House of Lords debating chamber.
Okay, well, let's go and have a look. Gosh. Wow. That is quite something, isn't it? Just the ceiling is fantastic. And then that slab of gold at the other end. And this is the most amazing throne. Do you think they let me say that?
I think not on this occasion. Well, everywhere you look, you can see the hand of Pugin.
Right.
Even on the wood carving on the bench ends.
Pugin created such an enormous amount of work that the pressure sent him mad and he died prematurely. But just look at his incredible achievement. The most distinctive feature of the Palace of Westminster is Big Ben, which is not actually the tower or even the clock, but the bell. The trouble is, it's 334 steps to the top. So why do they call a bell Big Ben? Well, there are various theories. Nobody actually knows the answer. One is that the Commissioner of Works was Sir Benjamin Hall, and at some point they had a debate to try and decide the name of the bell, and he gave an incredibly long and boring speech, and at the end of it, when he sat down, somebody said, "Why don't you just call it Big Ben and have done with it?" But then there's a rival theory. There was a prize fighter called Benjamin Comte who weighed 17 stone. And what's more, he was always called Big Ben in the papers and so on. And maybe it was called after him. Anyway, I think it's about to go. Listen to this. The quarter bells first. Actually feel the building vibrating. But curiously, it doesn't sound as loud as the quarter bell. Wow, that's one of those experiences I've always wanted. It is amazing to be right beside this vast bell, which you can hear for miles across London. Wonderful, wonderful experience. The 19th century Londoners saw magnificent palaces being built. Palaces for royalty, palaces for politicians. But what about ordinary working people? Well, down there is an example of what the public demanded. Palaces for the people. There, got it, just over there, that spike on the horizon. You remember the Crystal Palace, built for the Great Exhibition in Hyde Park in 1851? Well, when the exhibition was over, they moved the entire Crystal Palace to Sydenham. That's there, southeast London. And of course, the people up here in the north were cross because they didn't have a palace for the people, so they built this, Alexandra Palace. And actually, this is done rather better because the Crystal Palace burnt down in 1936, and this is still open. This was the place to come for theatre, concerts, circuses, fairgrounds, and too many sports to mention. Once, Blondin, the famous tightrope walker, walked across the south face of the palace while cooking an omelette. I don't know whether he took the cooker with him, but anyway, cooked an omelette on the wire. This was a cornucopia of delights for the working man. But Alexandra Palace has always been dogged by bad luck. Some people say this was because of a gypsy curse which was laid on the palace when it was first built and a traveller was evicted. Anyway, it was opened on the Queen's birthday in 1873 with tremendous excitement. In fact, in 16 days, 124,000 people visited. And then disaster struck. It caught fire and burnt to the ground in an hour and a half. 3 members of staff were killed. A brand new palace was opened only 2 years later in 1875, and again it was a great success. In 6 months, nearly 1.3 million people came here. But the success didn't really last because there were endless problems about maintenance. People went bankrupt and the whole place had to close down from time to time. And then in 1980, disaster struck again, and the whole of this wing behind me burnt to the ground. But it has lasting fame. Because it's on such high ground, this became the home to a brand new technology in 1936, television. The BBC transmitted the first real television pictures from here in 1936 and went on transmitting television for 47 years. In fact, for many years, it was a major production centre with a studio and all the other technical gubbins. There's also a television transmitter at the site of Ali Pali's former southern rival. But of course, the original Crystal Palace was located at Hyde Park for the Great Exhibition of 1851. Here it was open for only half a year, but an astounding 6.5 million people went to see it. The Great Exhibition was a tremendous success and made a profit of £186,000, with which they bought 87 acres of South Kensington. On the land, they built the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and this, the grandest of all, the Natural History Museum. Alfred Waterhouse was the architect responsible for this amazing building, a palace of nature. This is Rosemary Hill, who's an expert on Victorian architecture. I gather it was even more elaborate in the original design, is that right?
It was going to be much bigger. Waterhouse was given a budget of £500,000 to start with, which was then drastically cut, and so he only got to build the front and not the back and the sides, as he would have liked to have done.
Did the work go smoothly once it had started?
No, it didn't at all. What he was working with was a very Victorian technique, which they like to call constructional polychromy, which meant that instead of applying the colour to the surface of the building, as the Georgians had done, you actually built it in, as you can see here.
But was it very complicated, therefore?
No one had used terracotta on this scale, and of course that turned into a nightmare for the contractors, who in the end went broke because they couldn't provide enough fast enough.
Right. And presumably when the public arrived for the first time, they came in through this great sort of cave entrance.
It's a great arch, like a great opening in a cliff face, preparing you for what's inside.
Right. Well, let's go and see what is inside. After you. This is the most extraordinary building, isn't it?
It's a wonderful combination of the drama of scale and the drama of detail. One of the things that Victorians were very good at, especially after the Crystal Palace, was great public spaces. So you've got these great staircases, which are borrowed really, I think, from Italian palazzos.
And the detail, I mean, apart from the huge space, I love all these bricks and the little patterns in the brick, and these monkeys.
The Victorians loved narrative. Theirs was the age that produced all the great novelists, George Eliot, Dickens, and their buildings are full of stories that tell you what the building is as you move around it.
Now, these figures are obviously gorgeous. Who designed them?
Well, Waterhouse himself designed them. These are Waterhouse's drawings for the little animals and figures. They're extraordinarily delicate. Waterhouse actually wanted, when he was little, to be an artist, and his parents thought it would be more respectable and more secure if he became an architect. And on the whole, his buildings, he built some of the great big bruising buildings of the 19th century, like Manchester Town Hall. When you see those buildings, it's extraordinary to see the delicacy of his drawing. And here, I think in this building, he actually managed to bring the two things together.
So these are the monkeys, and you can see that he's drawn several different versions. And presumably these were then copied directly, were they?
They were copied directly into models, yes.
Right. I mean, it must have been a nightmare of a job to turn 2 dimensions into 3.
Although I think it's a very architectural line, and he's thinking in almost 2.5 dimensions as he's drawing. You can see that tail coming off the page.
Yes. And the lion?
The lion's wonderful, isn't he?
He is. I love the 4 paws, like a great big pussycat, the 4 paws in a row there. Well, there's a massive terracotta about, and I wondered how the stuff is made. John, suppose we want to make a column or pillar like this. This is terracotta, yes?
That's right, yes.
How do we do it?
Well, first of all, we make a plaster model.
Hang on a sec, that's bigger than this.
This is bigger. This is made about 8% larger, in order to accommodate the clay shrinkage actually during drying and firing. Once we've made the plaster model, we then make a reverse plaster mould.
Okay. Oh, I see. So we need to put some clay in. Should we take these off, do you think, before we start messing with the clay? It's heavy, this stuff, isn't it? What do we need to do?
What you've got to do is to roll it out on the bench.
Roll it out?
So that you get all the air out of the clay.
Right.
De-air it.
Oh, I guess if you have air bubbles, then that'll spoil the finished thing, won't it?
That's right, yeah. What we need to do then is to throw the clay inside the mould. What we do is put the clay in there and we thump it around.
Oh, that's brutal.
It is.
Doesn't it ruin your knuckles?
That doesn't help now.
Wow.
And then as you'll build that up to about a thickness of about 1.5 inches.
Can I do a bit?
You certainly can.
I'm a bit nervous about this because I value my knuckles. And you really do it all by hand like that?
Everything's by hand, yeah. Imagine it'll take about an hour to press a block like this.
Do you think we could peel away that little bit and see if it's worked? From the top?
Try, just give it a good there.
You don't trust my walloping, do you?
You could probably...
Oh, hey!
Look at that, you can start to see...
Oh, yes.
You can start to see it.
That's fabulous. And this is the very piece that I was trying to make. Isn't it fantastic? Now, once it's been fired, terracotta can't be cut. It can't be shaved to fit. Every piece has to be made exactly the right size and shape so that they all go together to make an enormous three-dimensional jigsaw. And just look at the resulting picture. The tradition of building palaces for the working people wasn't just a Victorian thing. The origins of the old Wembley Stadium also lie in a grand exhibition, the Empire Exhibition, opened in 1924 to show off the best of the British Empire. With the worldwide appeal of football, Wembley Stadium's two squat towers became as iconic as Big Ben. No wonder there were howls of outrage when the old stadium was knocked down in 2002. But a new Wembley is on its way. Its grand central arch will hold up most of the roof. Mike Richardson, the man in charge of the project, told me more. Now, the most obvious thing is the arch. Can you give me an idea how big it is?
Up to its apex is 133 metres high, which is 4 times the size of the old Twin Towers, and we could roll the London Eye underneath it.
You could roll the London Eye under it? Now, that would be a good demo.
Wouldn't it?
Could we try it?
Yeah.
How wide is it?
It's 7 metres diameter. We could put a tube train down the middle of it.
It's an enormous thing. What's it made of?
It's basically made of tubular steel, welded together in elements.
And how did you get it up there?
Well, they lifted the arch from the horizontal, and it was pulled in 5-degree increments, and we kept doing that over a period of a month.
A month?
And we went without a hitch for a month, and it went from horizontal to where it is now at 112 degrees.
How are you going to maintain the arch?
Its maintenance is either by abseiling, or we've got a little trolley that runs right up the centre of the arch and over the top, if you'd like to give it a try.
No, that's not a job I would very much like to have. What about capacity?
We've got 90,000 here, all seated, no columns in the way, unrestricted viewing.
So everyone's got a fantastic view. Well, I wouldn't. I'd get stuck behind a column. I always get stuck.
No, you won't find one, I'm afraid.
Just look at that. This brand new palace for the people is soon going to become a London icon, like Buckingham Palace or Big Ben's Tower. People will remember the Wembley Arch, not just across London, but all the way around the world.